Hello, peppers. Let's get peppy. Special impeachment episode.
Yes.
Let's not think about this as just the episode we owe you from last Friday. This is a special
impeachment episode. And happy Lunar New Year to all our peppers out there.
And happy Tet. That's a Vietnamese holiday.
Yes. Well, I was using the inclusive term that encompasses all the different lunar New Years, from Chinese to Vietnamese to Mongolian.
See, I know nothing about Lunar New Year's. I just know that we played a clip of the ambassador for Vietnam making a fool of himself for Tet. So that's all I know.
Okay. Anyway, it's the year of the ox. Can you think of a member of Congress who reminds you of the qualities of the ox? Work ethic, persistence.
Work ethic, you've lost me.
Yeah, it would have been a lot easier if it was year of the rat or year of the snake.
Yes. Well, stubborn. If we're going to call an ox stubborn, that's a lot of them.
Yes.
Yes. Let's just leave it there. Eating grass? I don't know. Let's talk impeachment rather than year of the ox. Well, I'll let you kick off. What are your first impressions before we really dig deep? Because
I was surprised that they got to 7 Republican
I was too.
votes.
I really was.
So, 5 of them were fairly predictable. So Romney, Collins, Murkowski, Sass, I think was quite predictable in the end, and Toomey had been foreshadowing this for a long time. Burr had been pretty quiet,
real dark horse
about this all the way through. Had voted voted twice that it was unconstitutional to let the trial happen at all. But fuck it, he's retiring.
Yes.
So we'll come back to him because Lindsey Graham had a very interesting suggestion about who should replace him in North Carolina.
Okay. Well, I'm looking forward to hearing that.
Yes.
Because we'll definitely be talking about where the Republicans are going from here at some point in time.
Yes. But then, of course, Bill Cassidy. Now, Cassidy had actually signalled a little bit that he might be open to it, even with the first vote on Rand Paul's motion about whether it was unconstitutional. Cassidy said afterwards, well, I voted that it was unconstitutional. He said, but we really didn't get to hear all the evidence on that. So he had actually kind of signalled in advance that he was open to it. Then he voted the second time around that it was constitutional, gave a very, very damning assessment of Trump's lawyers and a very good assessment.
A fair assessment.
Yeah, of the House managers.
Yes.
And then... said outright, I voted for impeachment because he was guilty. Now, that's a pretty brave vote. I mean, Louisiana, that is one of the reddest states. Bill Cassidy, I've got to admit, is not one of those senators that I had thought very much about prior to this.
I must say, he's disappointed me before, Bill Cassidy. And I know. And the reason why is because I held high hopes for him at one point in time.
You did?
Why? I did. Because he's an ex-doctor who he's probably still a doctor, who took an active interest in Obamacare and seemed to actually understand it, which was rare for a Republican congressperson or senator.
Yes.
He seemed to understand how it worked. He seemed to understand the nuances. And I thought, he was starting to craft his own alternative to Obamacare back when they were saying we're going to replace it with something.
Right.
He started crafting his own alternative.
Yeah.
And then he turned hack on it at the last second. And
hack on it. No, he was a hack all along. He concealed his hackness up to a certain point.
Sure.
Would be my interpretation.
I will say this, though. That it is a brave vote.
Yes.
He's from Louisiana. But on the other hand, if you look at the 7 people,
yes.
Let's leave Mitt Romney aside for a second. Let's look at the other 6.
Yes.
You've got Cassidy
yes.
has just won election. He's got 6 years to go.
Yes.
Louisiana has a jungle primary.
It does.
Which means that he doesn't face the same pressures that a normal Republican primary
That is very true, yes.
Because when there's a jungle primary, for those who don't know what a jungle primary is, it means everyone from all parties, independents, everyone goes into the same primary and they select 2 or 3 or 4, depending on the state, people to go through, which means that you as a Republican can draw votes from independents and Democrats as well.
This was how David Duke got into the final race for governor of Louisiana back in 1991 and got 41% of the vote.
Now, that as Dave just correctly pointed out, that can lead to David Duke,
yes.
but it can also lead to less accountability from your party.
That's right.
And so not only does he have the jungle primary, but he has 6 years. So
yes.
he has less incentive to fall into line than others.
That's right.
Equally, and the rest of the 6, you've got Murkowski is also facing a jungle primary.
Yes.
So she doesn't have the same incentives either. Burr and Toomey are leaving.
Yes.
So they have no accountability. Collins and Sass both just won elections, so
Yes.
they both have 6 years to go as well. So basically, 6 of the 7 had as close to no accountability as you possibly can have in the Senate.
That's right.
And the 7th is Mitt Romney, who has his own thing going.
Yes.
So some would say that the votes reflected the incentives of the political systems.
That's right.
Yeah. But sorry, keep on going.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that, we should put up that picture that I got from Hans Knoll earlier today. So Hans Knoll, political scientist who studies political parties. He had this very, very nice graphic basically showing most of the votes were pretty much, in line with what you would expect given how Republican or Democratic the senator's state was. So, for example, out of 5 Republican senators whose states were won by Biden, 3 of them voted for impeachment. By that measure, the bravest vote was Joe Manchin of West Virginia, because West Virginia was what percentage for Trump?
It was a lot.
70-something?
Yeah. Yes. It was a lot.
And he voted for impeachment. So, but anyway, I thought it was surprising that they actually got to 7, given how the previous votes had gone. By the way, for those of you who are wondering, who don't know the result of the impeachment.
Oh, we should say that, shouldn't we?
Trump got acquitted.
Yeah.
For the second time.
How about that? Which means they didn't get 67 votes out of 100.
So 67 votes would have been required, and they only got 57.
Which CNN assured me is the most bipartisan impeachment vote in history. Yeah. That's nice spin, guys.
Yeah.
Like it's been 4.
You're talking about a very small sample size. Like another one of them was Trump. Yeah.
And one of them was Clinton, which was a farce.
Yes.
Yeah. But I actually got to say, I actually found, like, when you sit there trying to think about what you would do in their circumstances, which I would. I actually found this tough, and I'll tell you why. I found it tough because I thought the House managers stuffed up in a number of ways.
Right.
I thought they stuffed up with the article they chose, they charged him with. I thought they didn't actually prove the case they were setting out to prove.
Yes.
But at the same time, I thought Trump was clearly guilty of impeachable conduct.
Yes.
Obviously so. And so you go, okay, if this is a court of law, he's innocent.
Yes.
Because they didn't prove it.
Yeah.
But this isn't a court of law.
It's not a court of law.
This is a political decision.
Can we just emphasise the degree to which an impeachment is not a court of law? And I think it is very important to emphasise, because there's such a temptation to talk about it in this really legalistic language.
Especially if you're Trump's defense lawyer,
Yes. Demanding that people come and give depositions in his office in Philadelphia. But no, it is not a legal It doesn't have to meet the same standards as a legal. It is a deeply political process. One of the interesting things about it, and this was a point made more than 50 years ago by Judith Shklar, a great political philosopher, in her great book Legalism, which I think is it's often overlooked in terms of the great pieces of political philosophy of the 20th century, but it really is one of them. And she points out, in liberal democracies, the extent to which what she calls legalism is actually the ruling liberal philosophy. And this is the idea of reducing rule of law and rule following and legal processes to a political ideology themselves and to a political program, which to this day I think is in many ways a fairly accurate diagnosis of the Democratic Party in particular. And also, it is also something that conservatives will retreat to as well. You see in both parties, there is this real sense of the law is always the final umpire. There's always this final authority up there, and it plays out in different ways for each of the parties. So for Republicans, whenever they talk about the Constitution, what they actually mean is, doesn't matter who wins the election, there's always things that politicians just can't do. Especially when it comes to confiscating wealth or putting limits on wealthy people. For Democrats, it is the idea that there's always going to be this final court of moral appeal that you can go to. And certainly Democrats learned in the 50s and 60s when the New Deal agenda was getting increasingly frustrated, even when Democrats had control of government, they did start really to develop these strategies of essentially advancing liberal legislative aims through the courts. But then there was this conservative legal backlash that happened in response to this. This is very well described in Stephen Tellis's book, The Conservative Legal Movement, which actually became the conservative legal movement ultimately became more effective in many ways than the liberal legal movement. But to get back to the original point, there is this interesting kind of, you'd almost say, fetish in the American political system for legal processes. The Supreme Court plays a much bigger role in American politics than high courts do in most other countries' politics. We've discussed this at length before in the podcast, and there's this real desire to mimic legal processes, whether it's in Senate or House committees, but impeachment is a sort of ultimate mimicry of legal process without actually being a legal process.
The thing that makes it the most farcical is is while they're mimicking these legal processes, they just simply use the trappings of a legal process to justify their gut instinct and their partisan interests. Like the idea that every single Democrat is of the view that constitutionally that you can impeach former officials.
Yes.
And almost every Republican is constitutionally of the view that you can't.
Yes.
What a coincidence that is. That happens to coincide with their
really hit the books on that one and somehow came to these opposite conclusions.
Yeah.
It is... I mean, I don't know quite what the Founding Fathers had in mind when they set up this ridiculous quasi-judicial process. I suppose it is part of that reality that the American system, despite all the talk about separation of powers, the powers are never quite entirely separated, right? So, for example, the judiciary has to be selected by the executive and confirmed by the legislature. I suppose you can see this as part of, actually, this little bit important bit of judicial power is kind of conferred on the Senate. And they take the farce even so far as to actually put the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court in charge of impeachment normally, though they didn't even bother with that this time around. And Republicans noticed that fig leaf was gone. They're like, well, I'm not going to participate in this farcical process then.
I will say this, though, given what you're talking about here, that I do feel like we already discussed that, we already mentioned in passing that the defense had a lot of trouble getting past the fact it wasn't a court.
Yeah.
I felt like the House managers had no problems with that. They dealt with that. They dealt with that better than I dealt with it, to be honest.
They dealt with that better than you dealt with it. Yeah, no, they knew what was really going on.
I was there getting frustrated at one point in time with the amount of time they were going through footage of the riot.
Yes,
Dude, no one thinks the riot was good.
Yeah.
You don't need to keep on telling us the riot's bad, but...
Yeah. No, they were using
but that was actually the most
opportunity.
effective stuff.
Yes, yeah.
And that does build pressure on the vote. Yeah, and I have to keep on telling myself that actually it's a good tactic.
Yes,
even though legally it doesn't make much sense.
Absolutely,
it's a great tactic politically, and also
it is political.
And I was also once again, much like Van der Veen, I was getting upset with the number of pieces of evidence that were just newspaper articles,
right?
And tweets with supposition and so forth. But once again, you can do that in an impeachment trial.
Yes,
it's not a court trial. Yes, you can do that in an impeachment trial. So anyway, I never actually said what I would have done if I was in a position. I would have voted to convict because I just thought he was guilty. Yeah, even though I don't think it was a great case.
I thought he was as well, but yes.
But the one thing I would say is that I did think that I'm going to go into more detail about the cases soon.
Yes,
but the ad hoc nature of the House case did bother me slightly. Like they kept on changing it on the fly. Like I'll give you an example of that. An example was when Tuberville's call with Trump came out. The details, right? They basically they knew.
Every morning I wake up and like, fucking Tommy Tuberville's.
He's the man.
Senator. Yeah.
Anyway,
Senator Tuberville.
So they already knew that Trump had called Tuberville via Mike Lee's phone.
Yes. Yeah.
And they already knew that.
Yeah.
But what they found out, what they thought they found out halfway through the trial,
Yes.
was that the call had occurred before before the tweet that
Right.
Trump sent abusing Mike Pence.
Yes. Yeah.
And that also that Tommy Tuberville had told Trump, I need to go because
Yes.
Mike Pence is being stashed away. And then he turned around
Hidden
and tweeted
underground.
abuse, right?
Yes.
And the Democrats went, wow, here's our proof. Here's
Yes.
our proof. The state of mind of Trump,
Yeah.
so depraved that he is putting his vice president in danger
Yes.
directly after he hears that he is in danger.
Yeah.
And he's endangering him more with his tweet.
Yes.
And then the next day, it turns out the Tuberville call was actually at 2:26 p.m. and the Pence tweet was at 2:24 p.m. So it was after that. And then they came out and said, you know what? Never mind. It was on TV anyway, so he must have known because it was on TV. And they just changed their line completely. And I just felt there was a lot of that kind of stuff where they were just changing their line. And when in the end, I don't think it mattered because Trump was so obviously guilty.
Didn't matter at all.
The
Yes,
votes were
yeah.
so clearly in either way.
Yes.
But that did frustrate me a little bit. I'll let you keep on going for a little bit, and then I'll go into a little bit detail.
First of all, I need to retract something that I said earlier.
That didn't take long.
I need to. Regarding the Lunar New Year.
Oh yeah.
I need to apologise to people born in the year of the rat and the year of the snake. No.
Have you already got complaints, even though we're not live?
No. We haven't got complaints. But within the Chinese New Year, snakes have a deep and complex mind.
Well, that's not like a congressman.
And they love with their entire hearts.
Well, that's definitely not like a congressman.
No, sorry, we're ruling all of you out. Maybe half of a rat, okay? Clever, quick thinkers, successful. Now, actually, I think that describes a lot of people in Congress.
Yeah.
Clever meaning not the same as we have with the depth of mind. The snakes we have.
I'll give Lindsey Graham that.
But content with living a quiet and peaceful life. Absolutely not. You've actually got to be a bit of a sociopath to run for Congress in the first place. A quiet and peaceful life is the last thing that you want.
I'm sure all people born in the year of the snake and year of the rat accept that apology.
Yes.
I'll accept on their behalf. Do you have some more general thoughts? Do you want to go into detail, just start going into the cases?
Some more general thoughts about impeachment. Yeah. So as you said, this was touted as the most bipartisan impeachment in history. I'm going to come back to this point later in the podcast, which is we are tending to look at this through the lens of what does this mean for the future, and particularly the future of the Republican Party and Trump's role in it. At the moment, any piece of evidence that we get can be interpreted in so many different ways. And I'm not just being sort of on the fence about this. I'm just saying we don't have the perspective yet really to judge because, yes, on the one hand, you can say this is the most bipartisan impeachment, not only the most bipartisan impeachment by the House, but the most bipartisan trial by the Senate in history. On the other hand, you have the vast majority of Republicans being unwilling to punish Trump for actions that literally threatened their lives.
In the case of Mitch McConnell,
yes,
he literally said he was guilty as well.
Yes.
Yes.
After he's left office.
Yes.
Unwilling to do it after. Instead, they use the fact that he's left office as cover for not taking action against Trump. Okay, so, yeah, I just trust any confident predictions at this point about what this is going to mean for the future. In the same way, if you just look at the election result, on the one hand, Trump is the first president since 1932 to oversee the loss of the House, the Senate, and the presidency. On the other hand, as Aaron Blake pointed out in the Washington Post this week, Republicans came within 90,000 votes of winning the whole thing. So it really depends on which way you look at it as to how Trumpian you think that the future of the Republican Party is. So I just want to keep that in mind as we go forward. This has not answered any questions in my mind about what, and I'm already seeing very confident op-eds being written by the usual suspects. So in the, E.J. Dionne, this is the beginning of the end of Trumpism. George Will, Mitch McConnell will now de-Trump the Republican Party.
Yeah,
That's wishful thinking.
Yeah. Look, I agree with you. I just think it's too early to know.
Yeah.
I do feel, and this is something we say a bit on this podcast, but I think it's usually true.
Yes.
That this is yet another example of Trump is going to control the party until he doesn't.
Yes.
And when he doesn't, it will happen fast.
That's right. Yeah.
And we won't know when it happens.
Yeah,
It'll
it
just
could
bang,
have,
it'll just
it
happen.
could already be in the process
totally.
of happening.
Yeah.
We keep hearing Trump's lackeys saying, "Oh yeah, he's just taking a few weeks of R&R. He'll be back." Maybe he doesn't come back.
Yeah, this is one of those ones which I think we're going to know in hindsight.
Yes.
Rather than
Yeah.
just
So his power may well be waning, as people are predicting. It may well be the case that actually that the Twitter ban and the social media bans were very, very important. We just don't know.
The only thing I would say, the only thing I would say that I do know, and it's not when Trump's power will wane.
Yes.
It's that I do know that if Trump's health maintains,
yes,
and he has the ability to,
yes,
he will run for president in 2024. I know.
You know this.
I know that. I'll tell you why I know that.
Why?
Because there's only one thing that motivates Trump, and it's grievance. It's resentment and grievance.
True.
And he has accrued a whole bunch of grievances over the last 2 or 3 months.
What if it's obvious that he can't win though?
What's I'm saying? If he can't run, he won't run.
Right.
Like I'm not saying expect him in 2024.
Yeah.
He might be too old. He might just become less popular. He may
Yes.
lose that power.
Yeah.
It may be pointless. He's not going to run then.
No.
But I'm just saying, if he is in a position to run successfully,
Okay.
he will run.
All right.
That's all I'm saying.
There you go. You've got Chaz's prediction.
There's
there.
no way that Trump has 70% approval amongst Republicans in 2024 and does not run.
Okay.
That is what I'm saying. But yeah, but we'll see if he's in that position.
Yes.
I want to start going into just diving into the case a bit because I just ran through a bunch of things I said before. I want to go into some detail. Like for instance, I just mentioned the House screwed up the article. Let me explain what I mean by that, because I think it actually led to a whole bunch of foreseeable results because they screwed up. Okay, first of all, I think incitement was always a mistake to use as their main article, and the reason for that was to show incitement of violence. You need to distance that from an attempt to politically intimidate Congress.
Right.
To say he's physically intimidating Congress.
Yes.
That's him to politically intimidating Congress. And that's tough because Trump has a long track record of both physical and political intimidation.
Right, yes.
And they look almost exactly the same in a lot of circumstances. And I noticed that they didn't even try to make that distinction, the House. But that's an important one because Trump is a bully. We know that. He bullies people all the time. We saw a great example from the House managers in one of the tweets that they highlighted where he said, this is on January 5.
Yes.
I hope the Democrats, and even more importantly, the weak and ineffective rhino section of the Republican Party, are looking at the thousands of people pouring into D.C. They won't stand for a landslide election victory to be stolen. At Senate Majority Leader, at John Cornyn, at Senator John Thune. So what he's done then, the Democrats were suggesting that was a warning of violence. I think that was clearly not a warning of violence. What that was him telling the 3 leaders of the Republican Party, we're coming for you. Not we're going to decapitate you, but you are going down. Like it was political bullying.
Can I give you my theory of what Trump actually thought was going to happen?
Sure.
Okay, because Trump's conception of reality has been shaped by a lot of movies. Bad movies.
Yes.
This is what I thought. Well, this is what I think he thought he hoped would happen. Right, that the crowd, he probably wouldn't call it the mob. Yeah. The crowd,
the people
of, patriotic Americans would get to Congress. Maybe they would go into Congress. And that, Republican congressmen and Mike Pence would hear them. Yeah. Hear their cries and would
scurry.
No, not scurry, but capitulate.
Yes.
Right? We'll go, now we see what the people really want. And some of the interviews with members of the crowd suggested that's what they thought was going to happen
And then sort of mosh pit style.
As well,
they moved
sort of
Trump to the dais.
Trump's here, and we're listening because they thought that Trump had come with them.
Yeah.
Because he said, we're going to walk down Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Yes, if Trump was ever going to walk anywhere. That's what they thought. It would have been like something out of a movie, right? The cavalry has arrived. Or, as happened in the trial, when there was a tweet that said, the cavalry has arrived.
Yes. And then they tried to
They tried to say that this wasn't someone doing one of the most common misspellings of cavalry, but actually making a reference to the hill that Jesus died on. Yeah. Now, as much as I can believe that a lot of people had that kind of religious imagery in their heads that day, generally spelling mistake is the most common explanation for anything.
Why would you think that makes you look better? To say, what I was saying was that the hill of Jesus has arrived.
We brought Calvary to you. We're going to nail Mike Pence to it, in fact. So, that's what he thought was going to. So, I mean, I can believe, and it's certainly very easy to convince yourself, if you need to, that, this was not what Trump intended to happen. He didn't intend window breaking, didn't intend them necessarily to erect a gallows outside.
That was not what he was going for.
Didn't necessarily. Certainly didn't intend anyone to get, shot by security. What he had in mind was that this big raucous mega crowd would get there, and then Republicans would see the error of their ways, and Mike Pence would have no option, You can imagine how theatrically this could happen. Look, sir, I think you need to see this before you go any further. And then Mike Pence looks out and remembers. Suddenly has this flashback, all these images in his mind of all these times that Trump was so awesome and he was so lame for not properly going along with Trump, but then saw himself at the last minute able to redeem himself.
And then all the big burly protesters would start crying to Trump.
Yeah.
Because they always do in these stories.
Yeah.
The big burly men always cry and say, sir, to Trump.
That's right. Yeah.
Look,
see, I could totally direct this alternate version of reality.
I happen to agree with you. That's probably what he was thinking. But obviously, it's hard for us to read his mind. But my point is, it is a totally rational explanation.
Right.
That he was not seeking violence.
Yes.
But these guys pin their impeachment article to the fact he was seeking violence. Especially given that 6th of January speech had no references to violence in it.
That's right.
And if you're going to say it's inciting,
you
need to find words to say those words.
Can I ask, and I might regret asking this. So last week you interviewed Alan Dershowitz.
We did.
There's no way I'm going to watch that fucking interview because there's no way I'm listening to Alan Dershowitz. But he does have a background as a very famous First Amendment lawyer. And I saw that the tagline was, he said, inviting, not inciting.
Yes, he did.
Can you explain that distinction?
Hey, look, I think it's got a little bit of if the glove don't fit, you must acquit.
Oh, wow.
It rhymes about
He's been waiting for, 25 years to come up with a rhyme as good as Johnny Cochran.
Yeah, I think it's got a bit of that
still
about
not as good. Sorry, Alan.
But it's fair to say that Alan's position is just purely Trump was just exercising his freedom of speech, and that's it. And if you think it's just about the 6th of January, then maybe that's an argument you can run.
Yeah.
But it's not just about the 6th of January.
It is not just about the 6th of January.
Yeah. So that's
by the way, having said all that, I still would have voted for
absolutely. Like
impeachment.
I said.
Because you look at the entire context of every. Yes, I think that they made I agree with you. They made a strategic error. But
and I should say as well that the defense did pick up on this, and it was once again one of those ones where they're worrying about the letter of the law.
Yes.
But I think they were right when they said they kept on getting very frustrated about Rule 23. And what Rule 23 is it's a Senate rule that says an article of impeachment shall not be divisible. What they mean by that is one charge, one article. If there's 3 different charges, there are 3 different articles. And there's a good reason for that rule. Mm-hmm. The reason for that rule is that if you want to get 2/3 of the Senate judging that he's done one particular thing wrong. If you load up 3 different charges in the one article, you might get a third saying he did one thing, a quarter saying the other thing, and that's not fair. Right? So they're right that you should only load up one charge per article.
Yes.
And they did not do that. Like in the article that they had here, they had at least two articles folded into one. One that he willfully, I'm quoting here, he willfully made statements that in context encouraged and foreseeably resulted in lawless action at the Capitol. That's one.
Yeah.
2, his prior efforts to subvert and obstruct the certification of the results of the 2020 presidential election. They are 2 completely different things that were in the same article.
Yes.
And then 3, this was particularly shoddy from the House managers, I thought.
Yeah.
They argued a third one that wasn't even in the article,
Right.
which was they started talking about his dereliction of duty after the riot started.
Yes,
with
yeah.
Mike Pence. And by day 5, that was all they were talking about.
Yeah.
Mike Pence and the National Guard and all that kind of stuff. That wasn't even in the article.
Yes.
And you could see they really dropped the ball when Cicilline, in their concluding remarks, said, quote, "Our article absolutely includes his dereliction of duty on January 6th," even though they didn't say that in the article. So you can tell they completely fucked that up. But by the fact that they were inventing things they hadn't put in the article in their conclusion. So they tried to make that about his state of mind, all the stuff that happened on January 6th to try and smuggle it in. But they were obviously trying to score a conviction out of that conduct by itself by the final day. Now, if it was me, I would have nailed him for a bunch of abuse of power and dereliction of duty things, which are clearly the case. That's what he was guilty of.
Yes.
There was a Georgia call, undermining the peaceful transition of power generally, intentionally spreading false claims that undermine the rule of law, not deploying National Guard, endangering the life of the vice president. There's about 10 of those abuse of powers if you want.
Yeah.
He's guilty of every one of them. Clearly, none of them require incitement or any of those kinds of issues.
Yeah.
So that's what I've gone.
So, did this bundling it all into incitement, and I think you're right about the indivisibility point.
Yeah.
By the way, did Eisenhower add under God into the indivisible clause? Sorry, that was a bit of a history joke. There.
All win.
In 1954, the Pledge of Allegiance was changed from one nation indivisible to one nation under God.
It was good.
Indivisible.
It was clever.
Best one ever.
I award you a full professorship.
Thank you. So I think that you're absolutely right about that. Was this piling it all into the incitement charge? Did that reflect the whole, we've got to streamline this, we've got to make it go as fast as possible because we've got to get back to getting $1.9 trillion in stimulus funds through Congress?
I'm guessing here, but my guess is they couldn't agree amongst themselves, and they just wanted to get it the hell out of there.
Yeah.
So they just didn't want to waste the time arguing, debating, and trying to work out. So they said, just shove it all into one article. Let's get it done. I think there was a lot of fatalism about it.
Yeah.
They just go, we're not going to win anyway. Let's just go through the process and let's just get it done. Just quickly, I was going to say that remember I said I think this led to a bunch of things.
Yes.
And one of the things I think that led to is that when you create this article, which it clear, I think is difficult to prove, the incitement article.
Yeah.
It means that you have to focus on the 6th of January speech because you need some kind of incipient nature of the speech.
Yeah.
It doesn't have violent words. So that then led to naturally them having to find stuff in the January 6th speech that they could then argue was insightful, or inciting. And that's why they started obsessing about fight like hell.
Yes.
They go, you use the word fight 20 times. And then that led to this massive farce where we had the defense spending the best part of half an hour trying to prove that other Republicans use the word fight. And they had a 9-minute montage, including Johnny Depp and Madonna using the word fight at some point in time. Were
they threatening to fight Barnaby Joyce?
It was literally, I don't know what they were threatening to fight because they were just clipping out the word fight over and over again. There was, at one point in time, they showed context of Chuck Schumer saying that his grab said, fighting the health crisis of COVID was one of the examples of the Democrats using the word fight.
Yeah.
And you just go, okay, well, this has just become completely stupid. But the reason for that is because the Democrats were also making a stupid point. And their point being they used the word fight a lot.
Yeah.
Well, that's not what incited people. It was the 2 months before it that incited people.
Absolutely.
Not the metaphor of fighting.
And there's just a point worth making here about Trump and the way that Trump speaks. So, a Trump speech rarely goes for less than an hour. Usually is closer to 2 hours.
Yeah.
Probably any Trump speech during that time, he says enough to provide himself plausible deniability for all of the other things that he's said in the speech. And it was entirely predictable that Republicans would focus on the point where he says, I know you're all going to be peaceful. Note he didn't tell them to be peaceful. He said, I know you're all going to be peaceful, which if you understand the kind of long-standing language that Trump's used over the 4 years, that's what that was really saying was, we're on the side of right. Whatever we do is right. We're not like those violent protesters. And that also makes sense of why his team has repeatedly said, oh no, Trump always condemns violence. It's the other side that's violent. It's all racially and politically coded. Violence, chaos, destruction. That's all Black Lives Matter stuff. We're all, even when we're being violent, we're on the side of peace. We're on the side of law and order. I would highly recommend an essay by Gabriel Rosenberg, who blogs or writes a newsletter for Substack under the name Bearistotle.
Jesus.
And has this quite good analysis of Trump's speech. A poetic technique going back to ancient Greece, which he refers to as, I think it's pronounced apophenia, which is about the kind of associations between concepts in Trump's speech. And the whole point is Trump often doesn't make explicit connections between the things that he's saying in his speeches. And so when you read a transcript, it's a bizarre experience because you're just lurching from one concept to another, seemingly at random. And you can go through a lot of concepts in a very short period of time. But he says, unlike normal political speeches, which are very much guiding the listener to a certain conclusion with very strong connections, part of Trump's kind of charismatic magic was that there was so much possibility in his speeches. The same kind of possibility that you see in poetry, where often connections are also not explicitly drawn between concepts, that allowed people to make their own connections. And not everyone would make the same connections between speeches, but there was always a lot of room, on the one hand, for people to make connections that led to revolutionary violence, and on the other hand, for people to make connections that led to the, saying, no, this is just really innocent stuff.
Which makes it very difficult to pass.
Exactly.
In a forum like this. Just to finish off, just to tie up this little point,
yes.
I was just going to say that I actually thought it led to this desperation to try to find things in this speech when he's rambling around everywhere. It actually led to what I thought was the House's worst moment, which was one of the very few absolute clean shots I thought the defense got off, which was the defense were desperately trying to act like the House manipulated everything. They were trying to get very worked up about that. They had at one point in time, they noticed some lame New York Times photo shoot where Raskin was looking at a tweet on his monitor and had the wrong date.
Yeah.
And they said, oh, look at that. That's not a real tweet because it had the wrong date. And then they said that they had a tweet from some person who had a blue check mark, but actually in real life, they didn't have a blue check mark. Oh my God. They used a graphic designer to design their tweets, to lay them out so they're easy to read. Manipulation, which is obviously stupid. But when they were doing that, they got one clean hit. And it was, in my view, because of the desperation of the Democrats trying to find something in that speech, they could say, there's some violent language right there. I'm going to show it to you.
One of the House managers made much of the president's supposedly ominous words of, you have to get your people to fight. But you knew what the president really meant. He meant that the crowd should demand action from members of Congress and support primary challenges to those who don't do what he considered to be right. Support primary challenges, not violent action. I know what he meant because I watched the full video, and so did the House managers, but they manipulated his words. You will see where they stopped it, and to give it a very different meaning from the meaning it has in full context. Let's watch.
You have to get your people to fight. He told them.
You have to get your people to fight. And if they don't fight, we have to primary the hell out of the ones that don't fight. You primary them, we're gonna let you know who they are. I can already tell you, frankly.
Okay, so what's happened there is they've clearly chopped off halfway through to make it seem like he's talking about general hoodlums fighting, when he's talking about politicians fighting metaphorically, and if they don't fight metaphorically, then we primary them. He actually explicitly said that. And they cut that off halfway through to go, oh, look, he's telling them to go get their people to fight. And I don't know. I mean, I think the reason they did that was because they were desperate and also because they were rushing. Van der Veen went crazy about that and said, you know, in a real court of law, if you did that, you're done. One case of manipulation like that, your whole case is gone. And he's probably right, but it's not a court of law.
No.
But having said that, that to me was their lowest moment. I think it comes as a direct result of the way they chose that one article with incitement, which has led to so many problems throughout their whole case.
Yes.
So I'm going to stop going on about that now. But
to reiterate a point we made last time, Chaz should have been one of the impeachment.
They should have a Republican. They should have had someone like Justin Amash or Kinzinger or Chip Roy or whatever. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Liz Cheney. Liz Cheney can argue.
Yeah.
Can argue against Trump, that's for sure. Anyway, I want to throw a question to you.
Yes.
Because now we're getting to another area with the House stuff, and we're talking about making a case. We moved to witnesses, and this became the big deal.
Right,
on the last day.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts about all that?
I agree with the analysis that said it ended up being this sort of fairly jarring contradiction that on the one hand, Democrats are saying this is so important that we need to impeach him, even though he's left office, even though we know realistically there's no chance of conviction, because we need to get this on the record, and then we don't call any witnesses. And I also agree with the analysis that says actually more could have come out from the witnesses, or at least more could have come out in a far clearer way. Now, I'm not saying necessarily that you accept, Jake Angeli's invitation.
Yes.
Jake Angeli, who you may know as the guy with the fur horns, offered to testify.
Yeah.
Imagine that.
Yeah. That would be interesting.
Welcome back to Congress, Jake. I'm not saying that you necessarily take up his offer, but I do think testimony from people who were involved in the riot could have actually filled in some blanks about the connection between Trump's words and their actions. Because, once again, because Trump has this apathetic speaking style that says different things to different people, there were definitely people who heard words of incitement there. And I think it would have been worth hearing from them. I think that, as you said, some of the most powerful stuff in the trial was, wouldn't have had much of a place in a real courtroom, but the kind of video footage that was played, that's going to be some of the enduring stuff from this trial. There could have been more enduring records that they could have put down. Especially
given, I agree with you completely, especially given, I mean, of course I agree with you, I've been talking about witnesses for the last 3 months, or 2 months. But yeah, especially given that they kept on saying, this is for history.
Yes.
This is for history. Like, we know what the result's going to be.
Yeah.
This is for history. This is a record. I completely agree. And for me, I agree with those kinds of witnesses that you're describing, the people who can establish the role that Trump played directly in the minds of the rioters. But also, I feel like the other big area was, once again, this comes off incitement, but even without incitement, you need to prove the state of Trump's mind.
Yes.
And on January 6th.
Yes.
And that's a hard thing to do.
Yeah.
It's an impossible thing to do without witnesses. They tried. I'll give the House managers credit. They did a good job of trying to use Trump's tweets to read his mind.
Yes,
on January 6th. Like they did a great job of pointing out that when Trump wants something to happen, he tweets out, "Stop the count" in all caps, and "Stop the fraud" in all caps. And that was very different to how he was tweeting on January 6th.
Exactly.
Talking about keeping peaceful and all the rest of it. And his final tweet was extremely revealing. The one about the let's remember the day. Like almost like it was like the Battle of Agincourt, some glorious victory. Like, he certainly wasn't acting like it was a day of sorrow and shame.
No.
Not at all. And so that did speak to his state of mind, I thought. So I thought Democrats did well there, but you can only go so far when you don't know what Trump was doing for the entire day. and you have no idea. And I mean, and you can see how valuable this would be when you saw how people were jumping out of their skins when that Kevin McCarthy call came out the day before.
Yeah.
Right. What I'm referring to there was that there was a one of the Republicans, and oh my God, she is so going to get primaried. One of the Republicans, Herrera Beutler from memory, was
Herrera Beutler from Washington.
Yeah, she basically had waited for someone to come forward, obviously Kevin McCarthy, ideally, to reveal this phone call. And they never did. So at the last second, she said, "Well, if no one else is going to, I'm going to just reveal it in hearsay and say Kevin McCarthy told me the day after this call happened that he received this call he called Trump, told him to do something about it. Trump said these guys are Antifa.
Yes, that's
and Kevin McCarthy said no, they're not.
Yeah.
And he said, well, apparently they care more about the election result than you do.
I can so imagine Trump saying that.
But can you imagine Kevin McCarthy then saying, who the fuck do you think you're talking to? Because that's what Kevin McCarthy reckons he said then.
Wow.
And I'm not sure I believe that. And I'll get to that in a second. But having said that, I do believe that Trump said that.
Yes.
And anyway, and when that came out, it was all like, oh my God, we need witnesses now. We need witnesses, because this actually shows his state of mind.
Yes.
This is the first time we see his state of mind. And his state of mind is he's on the side of the rioters.
Yes.
This proves he's on the side of the rioters. And so that's why they started saying, okay, let's get this witness in, because this woman, Herrera
Beutler.
Herrera Beutler, she was prepared to go on the record.
Yes.
Which is amazingly brave. To our brave people,
she
is so gone that she was willing to go on the record for this.
Yeah.
And if she had gone on the record,
yes,
someone else might have gone on the record. You know, that stuff is contagious, especially if she, if she made a good fist of it on the stand.
Yes,
who knows what would happen after that? You know, because there were others who said they heard the same thing as well.
Yeah,
and they might have heard other things. Republicans were all gossiping about what they'd all heard.
Yes, yeah.
And so you could see that that they were that was a big deal to people. And even then at that moment, they looked like they were going to do it. Kevin Raskin made the deal, and he said, it's only going to take an hour of Zoom to do it. And, before I say that, I was just going to say, you can tell how important this was as well by looking at the questions that were asked by the serious people. And there weren't many serious people in that room.
No.
But Collins, Murkowski, Romney, yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
And look at their questions. Collins, Murkowski. Exactly when did President Trump learn of the breach of the Capitol, and what specific actions did he take to bring the rioting to an end, and when did he take them? Please be as detailed as possible. They're asking for state of mind.
Yes.
Romney, when President Trump sent the disparaging tweet at 2:24 p.m. regarding Vice President Pence, was he aware that the Vice President had been removed from the Senate by the Secret Service for his safety? He's asking for state of mind. So the people who are actually trying to make a decision, that's all they cared about.
Yes.
And that would have been resolved by witnesses. Now, Raskin, he tried to get around this, to his credit, by noting, he turned to the law now, and he noted a legal precedent from Scalia, of all people, trying to appeal to Republicans, and this is what he said.
If you don't testify in a criminal case, it can't be used against you. Everybody knows that. That's the Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination. But if it's a civil case and you plead the Fifth or you don't show up, then according to Justice Scalia and the rest of the Supreme Court, you can interpret every disputed fact against the defendant. That is totally available to us. So, for example, if we say the president was missing in action for several hours and he was derelict in his duty and he deserted his duty as commander-in-chief, and we say that as inciter-in-chief, he didn't call off dogs, and they say, oh no, he was really doing whatever he can. If you're puzzled about that, you can resolve that dispute, factual dispute, against the defendant who refuses to come to a civil proceeding.
So he's essentially saying legal precedent when it comes to civil trials, at least, where it's not a criminal trial,
yes,
is if they don't agree to testify, everything that we accuse them of that they don't refute, you can assume that we're right.
Yes.
Which is, that might be legally true. I'm not sure that's super convincing, but they're going to say whatever the hell they like, and since Trump didn't self-incriminate, that means you can assume it's all true. But that was their best effort to deal with this particular question. But then I looked at Raskin's 4 questions he asked the defense. Do you remember how he had these four critical questions in his conclusion of his case?
Yeah.
2 of the 4 questions, he assumed the facts in. So here are the questions. 1, why did President Trump not tell his supporters to stop the attack on the Capitol as soon as he learned of it? That's just factual.
Yeah.
2, why did President Trump do nothing to stop the attack for at least 2 hours after the attack began? How do you know he did nothing? That's an assumption. As our constitutional commander-in-chief, why did he do nothing to send help to our overwhelmed and besieged law enforcement office for at least 2 hours on January 6 after the attack began? How do you know he did nothing? Nothing happened, but how do you know he tried to do nothing? That's an assertion.
Yeah.
On January 6, why did President Trump not at any point that day condemn the violent insurrections? That's factual. Okay, so the point I'm trying to make here is because there were no witnesses, there were question marks everywhere.
Yes.
In these critical areas. And I'll tell you the one I most wanted to know, Reince Priebus. I think I mentioned this on the show. So I mentioned this on our podcast. I don't remember if it was you or it was with...
It wasn't with me.
Okay, all right. Well, do you know what Reince Priebus' role in all this was?
No.
It's mostly overlooked, but to me, it's important. Apparently, according to a newspaper article, Trump rehearsed his election night speech with Reince Priebus months before the election. So Trump knew of the blue shift that we were all talking about, and every political advisor was talking about months beforehand. He knew it was coming. He understood it.
Yes.
He knew what that meant. He knew that on election night, he would be way ahead and then things would change. And so he prepared a speech to declare victory preemptively, to anticipate it, and to say that the steal was in. If that isn't true, and if that's true, and you can get Reince Priebus on the record to say that, then that proves his state of mind that every single thing he said was bullshit, which is a huge deal as far as impugning abuse of power on his behalf.
Yeah.
You know, it's one thing if he's an idiot who believes all this stuff. It's another thing if he's intentionally misleading people to try to suborn the results of an election. And so that to me is a critical witness. And we didn't even hear about Reince Priebus during his trial, let alone have him as a witness.
Yeah.
So to me, this was a massive issue. I understand why they didn't do it.
Yeah.
I understand that they wouldn't have made a difference to the vote.
No.
I understand that the people who were in the room with Mark Meadows and Steve Miller and his personal attaché, people who you're going to have to take to the Supreme Court. I understand that. But they didn't need to hold this trial in the Senate right away. They could have had a committee that was going through subpoenas for 3 years. Trump is not going to run for 4 more years, right? So they have years to do this.
I'm not sure how important I think the issue of does he really think the election was stolen was, which you seem to regard this as a critical...
I think if he's intentionally lying to America to create an incipient atmosphere of revolt based on what he knows is a lie, I think that is a whole different world.
You think he has to be lying? What if he sincerely believes it? I think he actually sincerely believes it at this point. Even if he was rehearsing it months beforehand. First of all, I'm not even sure that categories like true belief make sense in Trump's mind.
Sure, yeah.
Because I think there has been this... You know, there's been a lot of reporting from people saying, no, he really sincerely believes this. There's been other reporting that really casts doubt on it. I don't think the category even makes sense because I think that we're in the realm of pure bullshit here to go on the distinction of Harry Frankfurt, which is it's not that he sincerely believes the truth value to be true. It's not that he sincerely believes it to be false and is covering it. It's more, it doesn't matter what the truth value is. This is what he wants. This is what he wants to project. This is what he wants to believe. So I don't think it's actually that important. I mean, I think he may well believe that the election was stolen from him. I don't think that makes it any less incitement, the fact that he's trying to,
Fair enough, but don't you think it's important to show that he's on the side of the rioters? on the day.
Oh, yeah. No, I do.
Like, I'd be prepared to drag Mark Meadows to the Supreme Court for 2 years to get that out of him.
Weren't there reports, though, saying that when he actually saw the riot happening on TV, he was really disappointed because of how low class the rioters looked?
There were some of those reports, yes.
That's pretty funny.
That is pretty funny. But
I often think the worst punishment you could possibly give to Trump would be to force him to live in a community of his own supporters.
Yeah.
He would just hate that so much. I mean, for the last 4 years, we've seen he goes out of his way to avoid ever coming into serious contact with the kinds of people who were doing the Capitol riot.
Yeah, that's fair.
No, he wants to hang out with other fellow old rich people in Mar-a-Lago. That's his scene.
That would be a nice punishment.
Yeah. Actually hang out with some of these angry young men in their world.
I should say, before we move on from the witnesses thing, this does lead to the moment you described before, which I should play the clip because it is one of the highlights of the trial.
Okay.
Which is when they were debating whether to have they'd already voted to have witnesses.
Yes.
And then they were arguing about whether to backtrack or not.
Yes. Yeah.
And Raskin was saying, we're just going to do it over Zoom in an hour. We'll get it overdone nice and fast. And then Van der Veen says, I'm going to slap subpoenas on a good number of people if you do that.
Yes.
Quote, I'm going to need at least over 100 depositions, not just one. And then he led into this moment.
Yes. This is great.
the greatest moment.
If he does, there are a lot of depositions that need to be happening. Nancy Pelosi's deposition needs to be taken. Vice President Harris's deposition absolutely needs to be taken, and not by Zoom. None of these depositions should be done by Zoom. We didn't do this hearing by Zoom. These depositions should be done in person, in my office, in Philadelphia. That's where they should be done. I don't know how many civil lawyers are here, but that's the way it works, folks. When you want somebody's deposition, you send a notice of deposition, and they appear at the place where the notice says. That's civil process. I don't know why you're laughing. It is civil process. That is the way lawyers do it. We send notices of deposition.
I would remind everybody that we will have order in the chamber during these proceedings.
I haven't laughed at any of you, and there's nothing laughable here.
Okay, this I think is the point that we need to ask.
Yeah, I know we're going to ask
our audience. Okay, so not just Van der Veen, the three lawyers. Yeah. So we're talking Castor, Schoen as well.
Yeah.
Okay, there was a lot of chat online of which TV lawyers or movie lawyers do these remind you of?
Look, I don't know about the movie lawyer, but honestly, when there's a movie of this, Van der Veen is going to be played by Robert De Niro. Oh, there is just no doubt whatsoever.
No one in the history of Philadelphia has ever pronounced Philadelphia like that before. Philadelphia. So, I mean, I think, the name Lionel Hutz was getting thrown around a lot. These the actions of a man who'd had all he could eat. But we want to see in comments which lawyer does this remind you of the most?
YouTube comments, Facebook comments.
The Bird lawyer from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia is one who constantly came to. But actually, I think the lawyer from Idiocracy.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Especially for Castor, because the moment towards the end when Castor basically said, look, why are we having an impeachment? We've got criminal law for things like this. Criminal law knows how to deal with this. It's essentially suggesting that Trump should actually be arrested and charged under criminal law. It reminded me of the bit in Idiocracy where the lawyer just changes sides halfway through. And he interrupted me while I was watching Out My Balls.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I am looking forward to those comments.
Yes.
The thing that's amazing, though, is I can also throw in Marsha Blackburn tweeted, if you want to call witnesses, we have a list. If you want to have a trial for 2 years, it would derail the whole Biden agenda. Can you believe
Yeah.
it worked? It worked. This is just laughable. The Democrats have to agree to any witness that is called. The Democrats don't have to agree to 2 years of witnesses.
No, they don't.
They have to agree to go to Philadelphia. They just like the Democrats. It's up to them.
Yeah.
So they control the process.
Yes.
So it is just. I can't believe they folded. I just can't believe they folded to these obvious bluffs.
By the way, Van der Veen, so normally is a personal injury lawyer. Now, I've got nothing against personal injury lawyers. They do a very important job. But in the US, there's this particular genre of personal injury lawyer. In every town, there's one who's got their own TV ads. So in Michigan, I remember it was the Bernstein family.
Sure.
Where, they're always like, we get results. Come to us. We'll get you results.
Well, Van der Veen got results.
And that's I can really imagine him cutting one of those ads.
Yeah. What do you have any favourite moment? We've talked about the House prosecutors enough. Do you have any favourite moments from defence?
No, it was just low light after low light.
I think my favourite moment was the montage music. They just kept on having this music in all their montages, like it was the Day After Tomorrow or something.
Yes, yeah.
Like John Williams was making the score. It was incredible.
We've talked about what were the major growth industries that enjoyed golden periods under Trump. Now, we've talked about out of context, exonerating soundbite industry, really a golden age. But another golden age is license-free music that you can get off the internet for dramatic moments.
Hey, we use it plenty on our show.
A lot of Trump's videos just had this music that when people went looking for it, it was, I remember when he came back from COVID.
Yeah.
And there was this very dramatic video showing helicopters and stuff. And people were like, what the fuck is that music that they were using? It came from a free source that you could use it was called Masculine Tunes or something.
I so hope that's true.
Yeah.
Masculine Tunes.
Something like that, yeah.
The other thing is, everyone talked about how bad Castor was on day one.
Yes.
But I actually thought he was worse on day 4.
That's a huge call.
I mean, because on day 1...
Tell the Peppers why he was worse on day 4.
Like on day 1, he didn't say anything, but what he said on day 4 was just garbage.
No, he said a lot on day 1. He congratulated the House managers on what a good case they made.
That's true. And he talked for ages about how wonderful the senators are in general. And
that was very weird,
It was very strange. But on day 4, he was just... It was like he was... Like I talked before about how Trump's a bully and how I think that what was going on with the insurrection, well, what Trump was intending was to bully Congress rather than to kill them.
Yeah.
I think we saw what Trump does with his lawyer. Like Castor was a joke on day 1.
Yeah.
So then on day 4, he came out as this piss-weak mini Trump. Like clearly Trump had yelled at him to the point where he was going, okay, sir, okay, I'll give you exactly what you want, sir. And he came out saying shit like, this is a quote. Trump is by former President Trump is by any measure the most pro-police, anti-mob rule president this country has ever seen.
You can always tell when someone's had a conversation with Trump. Had a Stern talking from Trump. That's amazing.
That sounds like his doctor. The guy with the long hair.
Yeah.
just what the hell is that? And he just made up stuff. He said the rejection rate in Georgia. The ballot rejection rate in Georgia was 6.4% in 2016 and 0.4% in 2020. It was exactly the same in 2016 as it was in 2020.
Sean Spicer redux.
It was just so embarrassing. He just said so many things that were just embarrassingly
I remember
wrong.
After the first day, I think I lost count of how many solemn articles I read. The genre of we spoke to 36 people, all of whom were anonymous, about how pissed off Trump was on the first day. Because
of Castor.
Because Castor wouldn't acknowledge that the election was stolen.
Well, he got his result. I'm telling you, Castor was doing his best on day 4, but it was embarrassing. It was like Van der Veen was, people were laughing at him, but he was actually making legitimate points. Castor was not coming even close. But anyway, I'd say also with defense that the...
another thing that this is a golden age for.
What's that?
you saying that complete idiots are making legitimate points. I'm not saying that you're wrong.
Yeah.
But the number of times you've just described someone saying the most moronic thing.
Yeah.
So, but it's a legitimate point, at least that was a legitimate point.
Let me be clear. Castor was not making legitimate points.
Yes.
I'm talking about Schoen and Van der Veen were making points at times that were like, for instance, I'll give you I'll tell you a point that Schoen made that was perfectly fine.
Yes.
Which was quite cute. One of their montages, and the only montage that didn't suck, was this montage of the House managers using the word reportedly, and according to sources, and like in their presentation, and then after he came off the back of that with saying, "Reported is a euphemism for I have no real evidence. It's as reliable as I Googled it for you." And I thought that's a fair line. So he's right. Reported, whatever. But that was not Castor. But no, I was going to say that they really hung their hat on the freedom of speech thing, and a lot of people acted like that was insanely stupid. And I disagree with that. That was insanely stupid. I don't think it was. I mean, there are legitimate lawyers out there, constitutional lawyers, who think that.
Are you talking about Dershowitz again?
No, I'm not. I'm not talking about Dershowitz.
Okay.
I'm talking about Josh Blackman, who is a respected constitutional lawyer, who said, he seems to be kind of on the fence about it, but he basically has. Throughout the trial, he was going into some detail. I won't bore you with it. But the fact is that, especially because Democrats are making such a big deal out of the January 6th speech, like that does bump up against freedom of speech arguments. Where you go, are you saying that what Trump said on January 6th is impeachable? The answer is no. It's the entire pattern of conduct combined. But the fact they kept on fixating on the January 6th speech, I can see why it bumped into freedom of speech concerns. I personally reject them because, as we noticed, as was noted a number of times by Raskin, this is about protecting the Constitution and about a job. It's not about criminal liability.
Right.
But I was going to say that I felt like they really didn't offer any attempt to interact with almost all of what the Democrats were saying. Yeah. Which to me was, it didn't matter in the end, obviously. Yeah. But in terms of the arguments, I found that kind of lame that they even try to interact. Like, it's fine, make your freedom of speech argument. Yeah. Make your jurisdiction argument, then address it. Like Castor, one of his fine moments was to rebut the January 6th part, which was always a bit lame, and then say, so therefore they have no evidence whatsoever to establish that my client did anything. And you just go, well, hang on, you just left out 12 hours of argument. Yeah. It's I found that a little bit lame. Do you have anything else to say at defense? Or?
Oh, look, okay. So for every single critique we have made, we have to keep in mind that the outcome of the trial was always foreordained. Yeah. So where people have been a bit lame or a bit lazy, I can sort of understand, or, just haven't given it their best shot. I can sort of understand it in terms of, Trump's side especially, criticizing Trump's lawyers for getting things wrong or being a bit lame. It's like, it was almost a dominance ritual for them in the sense of, we know we can say whatever we want, and he's still going to get acquitted.
It's fair to say that Van der Veen definitely sees himself as an alpha dog. That is for sure. Let's talk. I'm just conscious of the time. Yes. Let's talk Mitch McConnell, because obviously a lot of people are talking about him. What's your take
on Mitch McConnell?
Yeah.
He is who we always knew he was.
On his speech, I was coming because okay, let me frame this for you a little bit more.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
Like he gave some of the most effective arguments against Trump in his speech of acquittal.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
In particular, there were things he said which I thought, like hallelujah.
Yes.
Like for instance, this point, I was so glad to hear this.
Yeah.
In recent weeks, there's a quote, our ex-president's associates have tried to use the 74 million Americans who voted to re-elect them as a kind of human shield against criticism. Using the 74 million who voted for him as kind of a human shield.
Yes.
Anyone who decries his awful behaviour is accused of insulting millions of voters. That's an absurd deflection. 74 million Americans did not invade the Capitol. Hundreds of rioters did. 74 million Americans did not engineer the campaign of disinformation and rage that provoked it.
Yeah.
One person did. Just one.
Yes.
And I was like, hallelujah, because I'm so sick.
Loath to say,
of the
but that
74 million.
is actually a good point.
Yeah.
That Mitch has just made there.
I also thought he took on the defense in a way that House managers did not actually with that, which was this quote: "The issue is not only the president in the president's intemperate language on January 6th. It's not just his endorsement of remarks in which an associate urged, quote, trial by combat.
Yes.
It was also the entire manufactured atmosphere of looming catastrophe, the increasingly wild myths about a reverse landslide election that was somehow being stolen, some secret coup by our now president. Many politicians sometimes make overheated comments or use metaphors. The unhinged listeners might take literally, but that's different from what we saw. This was an intensifying crescendo of conspiracy theories orchestrated by an outgoing president who seemed determined to either overturn the vote's decision or else torch our institutions on the way out."
Yeah.
That was pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a lot more effective than a lot of what the Democrats said.
So given that, now tell me what you had to say about Mitch McConnell.
Yeah, okay. And obviously he is not one of the 7 who
Definitely not.
voted to convict. I mean, that speech does kind of make me wonder, and especially given that there were a couple of unexpected votes to convict on the Republican side, that if he had wanted to, could he have actually whipped
10.
the Republican votes?
It's hard to know. I do know that he tried to whip against the Republican votes.
Yeah.
And what I'm saying, and I'm kind of spoiling here, but my conclusion on him. But
just give us your conclusion. You're not interested in what I think about this. You're clearly you've got a point to make.
No, I do have a point to make, but it fits into your point, so I'll make it here, which is that he sent an email out on the morning saying, "I am going to vote to acquit, and here is why."
Yes.
And he gave them a very sophisticated argument for why they should acquit, and then they all just repeated it. All the Republicans. He gave them their out.
Yeah.
So that is effectively whipping against conviction.
Yes.
So anyway, go on. So could the opposite have happened? I don't know. What do you reckon?
I don't know. We'll never know. And actually, no, it couldn't have happened. As we mentioned a couple of weeks ago, if the trial had been held, maybe if the trial had been held kind of immediately after the riot, if it had been held in that 10-day period, even then, I'm not sure. I mean, impeachment in the House got 10% of the House delegate. No, it wasn't 10%. 5%. 10 members. 5% of the Republican delegation involved. Now, the Senate, you're always going to get more, but I still think that it would have been short of that number. But I mean, Mitch McConnell, he is just a thoroughly political creature. And it's not that he has no motive beyond maintaining power. He's actually been quite good at advancing Republican aims. But he is just thoroughly a creature of power. Yes, that was a great speech that he made, but it was certainly very much separate from his actual actions, I think, when it came to, voting.
My personal view is he definitely couldn't have got the 10. And the reason why he was even close, if he was close, and I'm not sure he was close.
Yeah.
The reason, if he was close, it was because he had 6 years to go in his term.
Yes.
Like the other 6-year guys.
Yeah.
And it's a lot easier for someone who's got 6 years to go to vote than to vote against Trump than 2 years to go or 4 years to go. And for that reason, I think he might have carried maybe 1 or 2 extra votes of people who also had 6 years to go.
Yeah.
But I think the bottom line is, we can't ignore the fact that the only people who voted against Trump are the people who could almost escape accountability.
Yes.
And there just aren't enough of them in the Senate.
Yep.
So I just don't think it was ever going to happen for that reason.
Yep.
I haven't complicated views about McConnell in this, because like a lot of people bashed the hell out of him immediately after. They said, "Oh, look, that's great. That's wonderful. You're giving your acquittal speech." So you're giving a conviction speech and then acquitted him.
Yes.
And you're saying, "Oh, we can't do it because of the Constitution, because you can't you can't impeach and you can't remove and a former president. Well, hey, Mitch, why didn't you just hold the trial early? It was your choice to have a recess rather than have a trial before Trump left. So it's your fault. So this is bullshit. You're having it both ways. You stopped the trial occurring before Trump left, and then you're using it as an excuse to not convict him. He actually took care of that argument in his speech. And I'll read you some bits, which I thought was, I thought that it was a deceptively sophisticated argument he was making, which was that, and it was an argument I haven't heard from anyone else. He started off with the usual argument about, I'll just read it to you, of the jurisdiction, where he said, the Constitution gives us a particular role. This body is not invited to act as the nation's overarching moral tribunal. We're not free to work backward from whether the accused party might personally deserve some kind of punishment. Justice Joseph Story, our nation's first great, etc., as explained nearly 200 years ago, the process of impeachment and conviction is a narrow tool for a narrow purpose. Story explained this limited tool exists to, quote, secure the state against gross official misdemeanors, end quote. That is to protect the country from government officers. And he then went on to say he's no longer a government officer. The country does not require protection. Now to be honest, that's taking an argument that the House managers were making over and over again, that this is not a criminal trial. This is about protecting the government. Yeah. And Mitch McConnell is using that argument and saying you no longer need to protect the government once the president is gone.
I think he's wrong about that. But
I agree.
Yes.
He's wrong about that. But we've heard that before. This is where he departed. He then, interestingly, went straight for the January exception argument, and said, because that is a logical corollary of that argument, saying, well, if that's the case, then if someone does something in January, it's too late to get them. He said, the Senate was right not to entertain some light-speed sham process to try to outrun the loss of jurisdiction. It took both sides more than a week just to produce their pre-trial briefs. So what he's saying there is there is a January exception. He's saying they're right. There is a January exception. He's not denying it. He's saying that it takes a certain amount of time to hold the trial. And by the way, he's right about that as well, because what he's saying, they did not have the time to hold this trial. What a lot of people don't realize is that there was 2 weeks between the riot and the inauguration. 7 days of that was chewed up by the impeachment, which was only a very short debate and a vote. They chewed up 7 days. So there's only 7 days left after that. And he made the point that the pre-trial briefs took a week, as it was. And the trial took 5 days. So there was no way they could have held a trial. They could have arranged and then held the trial in 7 days. Yep. So he was right about that. But then, this is the subtlety. He said we think of impeachment the wrong way. This underscores that impeachment was never meant to be the final forum for American justice. Impeachment, conviction, and removal are a specific intragovernmental safety valve. It's not the criminal justice system where individual accountability is a paramount goal. So he was saying, back to our criminal justice thing, that the impeachment is not meant to be the final arbiter. It's meant to have the pure process of getting someone out of government who does not belong in government. And if you want actual accountability, you use other methods, either the civil or the criminal justice system. And then he went to say Trump hasn't got away with anything yet, is what he was saying. Yeah.
Well, let's acknowledge he knows that Trump is not going to get criminally prosecuted.
He's not. Now, I think the argument is more subtle than people suggest, but I think it's wrong. And let me tell you why I think it's wrong.
Chaz has been thinking about this a lot on his own.
I have.
Possibly rehearsing it with his dog. Mercury makes these points and then Chaz just shoots them down.
It's fair to say that Mercury has the better of me. I don't try to debate Mercury. He's a very sharp pup. Now, we heard endlessly from CNN after.
Yes.
They were terrible by that. They were so biased. Anyway, we heard endlessly from CNN afterwards about the Senate voted that it was jurisdictional. You can't then turn around and not convict because of jurisdiction reasons. The Senate officially made it constitutional. Well, no, the Senate...
Once again, not a real court.
Yes. The Senate took a vote that for the purposes of this trial, they were going to deem it to be constitutional. And then what happens then, if you disagree, if you're Mitch McConnell and you are fair dinkum and you're not using rationalizations, and you genuinely believe that it's unconstitutional, but the Senate has deemed it constitutional, this is what you do. What you do is you say, okay, we are going through this process at the moment. It's happening, whether I like it or not. I am going to assume this process is legit.
Yeah.
And then we challenge it at the Supreme Court. Because it's the Supreme Court that decides these things, not Mitch McConnell.
By the way, do you remember when earlier in the podcast I talked about this book, Legalism by Judith Shklar, how she elaborated that there's this entire political ideology based around legal rule following? It's Chaz.
It's me.
Chaz is Mr. Legalism.
I did tell you.
I've been misclassifying you as some kind of libertarianism, but no, you are just a full-blown legalist.
Can't they be both?
Half the time you've been talking in this podcast, I have been wondering, does any of this actually matter?
Well, intellectually.
Well, yeah, intellectually within this system,
Yeah.
where rule following is extremely important, and even if the whole thing is a bit of a farce, it's really important for the internal consistency of the system.
Yes. That's my position.
I'll acknowledge here, political scientists have our own ideology, which is essentially everything is political and everything is politics, and that is far more what I'm following, which is, I suppose, why I haven't been as intellectually troubled by some of the same things as you, or as intellectually impressed by some of the same things as you, because to me this is just McConnell doing pure politics. The fact that he has managed to engineer his words in such a way that, you have absolutely rightly pointed out how he has covered his ass in a very legalistic
He has.
way.
He has. Look, you're right.
But nonetheless,
You're right.
what he's done...
I am a little bit on the spectrum with this kind of stuff. I do admit that. That is a little bit. That is true. But we knew that. You knew that when you got into this. Don't pretend you didn't know. I was a snake when you let me in. An honest snake. What were the emotions of snake?
Snakes have deep and complex minds.
There you go.
And they love with all their hearts.
There you go. I love legalism with all my heart. But I was just going to say that you might try this. Riddle me this. This is relevant.
Yes.
If they did what I suggested, if they were acting with good faith,
yes,
which Mitch McConnell's clearly not,
right,
because he sent out that email on the day trying to whip votes.
Yes.
Yeah. It's that was my conclusion. He was clearly full of bullshit because of that reason. If he was for real, he wouldn't have tried to whip votes before.
Yes.
But if they were practicing good faith and they appealed and they appealed to the Supreme Court, you know what would happen?
What?
We would finally get a ruling. Because back with Belknap in 1876, they had the same argument, and the same thing happened. The same thing happened where the Senate said it's constitutional.
Yes.
And then all the people who said it's not constitutional voted against it anyway because it wasn't constitutional, and the guy got off. Same thing just happened now. There's still no resolution. In over 140 years, there's still no resolution. And the next time it happens, there'll be no resolution again until it goes to the Supreme Court. When the Supreme Court issues a ruling, then it will be resolved. And then we can move past this shit the next time it happens afterwards. So actually, if you're worried about the future, which is what this is all about.
The future of pretend trials in Congress with preordained results by politics.
Yes, if you're worried about
What do you think the Supreme Court's going to say? You can do whatever the fuck you want in your pretend court. You can get on your Sesame Street phone and call Elmo as a witness if you want. We don't care, fuck off.
If the Supreme Court says we don't care, fuck off, then that means the next time round, it's a less powerful argument.
Okay.
That it's unconstitutional. Because like I say, the Supreme Court just said we don't care, fuck off.
Yeah.
In Roberts versus we don't care. Anyway, that's enough. I won't talk about McConnell. Tell me where we're going. Where are we going from here?
Well,
Republicans,
good question.
In general,
so
the world.
Bill Cassidy said he thinks that Trump's power within the party will wane.
Yep.
Lindsey Graham, an unsurprising vote for acquittal.
What a weasel.
What an absolute weasel.
What a weasel.
And there is no year of the weasel, so we're not being offensive to anyone here.
Do you know what he did on the riot day, Lindsey Graham?
What did he do?
He rang up Ivanka Trump, begging her to convince Trump to tweet out to his followers. God.
How pathetic.
Not only did he acknowledge with his behaviour that Trump was in control of the situation and failing, but he went through Ivanka because he's too wussy to ring up Trump himself. What a weasel.
Anyway, so he suggested as we said, Richard Burr was one of the surprise votes to convict.
Yeah.
Richard Burr is retiring. Lindsey Graham suggested that Lara Trump should be the Republican Party's nominee.
Oh, Lindsay.
Now, for those of you who can't keep your Trumps straight,
Lindsay.
Lara Trump is Eric Trump's wife.
What happened, Lindsay? What happened?
Imagine that. Someone who makes the life choice to marry Eric Trump. That's who you want in the Senate.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
What happens to Kevin McCarthy? Is he going to stay minority leader?
Well, this is the thing. A lot of people have now been put in these really difficult positions where, because absolute loyalty to Trump is the benchmark for the Trump base, which is such a substantial portion of the people who vote in primaries. That you can't piss them off. So there's them, and then there's every other constituency. It's basically impossible to keep any other part of your constituency happy while still keeping the Trump base possible. So even though Kevin McCarthy has more or less 95% of the time done the bidding of the Trump base, that 5% where he hasn't could just fuck him. Those heated moments after the riot where he acknowledged that Trump was responsible for it.
The moment where he said, "Who the fuck do you think you're talking to?"
Yes.
Apparently.
Yeah.
By the way,
Yeah.
can I just note that according to him,
Yeah.
he said to Trump, "Who the fuck do you think you're talking to?" And then told everyone about it, boasting about
Wow.
the time,
Stood up.
This is why I said to Trump. And then immediately after that, he voted to overturn the certifications of the election, and then went straight to Mar-a-Lago begging for the mailing list from Trump and posting that embarrassing photo, and Trump didn't give him the mailing list. How embarrassing to be Kevin McCarthy.
Embarrassing. Why do people voluntarily participate in Trump's rituals of domination of them? But anyway, so I mean, we made the point earlier. It's really impossible to tell which way it's going to go. What we do know, though, is that at the moment, certainly the machinery of the Republican Party is in the hands of Trump loyalists. Yeah, at the moment. So we've, Bill Cassidy was censured within hours by the Louisiana Republican Party, as was Richard Burr by the North Carolina Republican Party. Now, it's interesting to look at that machinery because in the past I've often thought party machinery in the US is just not as important as it is in other countries. And that's because legislators have to essentially run their own campaigns, raise their own funds. They're not dependent on party machinery. They don't get a lot of help from party machinery. What the party machine essentially does traditionally is to run elections. That's become less and less important ever since the open primary era. But its importance actually does seem to be making a comeback. Like the RNC now, in the Trump era, now that it's all trumped up, seems way more assertive and more powerful than it has done in previous years. By the way, the chair of the RNC is Ronna McDaniels, formerly Romney McDaniels, actually deleted the name Romney because Trump doesn't like it. So this Trumpian control of party machinery, I can see when the primaries come along, could wreak all kinds of havoc on people who aren't on board. Now, traditionally, I would have said the party machinery is way less important, first of all, than the legislators themselves, but second than right-wing media. But of course, right-wing media is right in the tank for Trump at the moment. So, but also donors. Okay, so this is where it's not uniformly pro-Trump, right? A lot of major donors seem to be rethinking Trump. As much as they were on board with him for most of the last 4 years, we are now seeing a lot of reports of major donors backing down.
But Mitch McConnell probably owns them, doesn't he?
Well, yes, Mitch McConnell's got very close relationships with them, but I keep thinking of that $250 million that Trump raised in that few weeks between the election and him leaving office, which was almost entirely small donors. Now, this is not to say that large donors aren't important. They are very important. But if he can raise that kind of money off small donors, and even more important than that kind of money, behind every dollar that gets donated, that's an hour that someone is prepared to throw at their politics, right? That money is coming from people who aren't rich necessarily in monetary terms, but who might be time rich, right? This is your classic activist base of politics. This is retirees, and this is also, this is people who are prepared to throw a lot of energy into their politics. This is people who have that time to spend, or even if they don't have that time to spend, even if they are, fully employed, nonetheless, these are people who, in their leisure time, make that time for their politics. These are people for whom politics is a very important activity. So that time and energy, that's a more important resource in the end than money. It was that time and energy that got Trump elected in 2016. It was that time and energy that came close to getting him elected again in 2020. I still think that one of the untold stories of 2020 is just the massive asymmetry between the on-the-ground volunteering of Republicans and Democrats, which was, that was kind of a conscious decision by Democrats not to do that until the last minute because of the pandemic. The Republicans still had all of those volunteers who were willing to go out and keep doing it, and I think they got a huge advantage from it. Trump has that part of it is very, very clear that he's got that part of the party, and I think that's reflected in the control of the party machinery. So I think it's not so much the control of the party machinery itself; it's the hold that he has over the people who are prepared to devote that much time to politics.
I think I agree, and I think that's particularly effective in the primary because when you're talking about general election, while you were saying that, I was thinking, and he creates an army of people against him.
Exactly.
Well.
Yes.
But not in the primary. He doesn't.
No, and certainly yes. Always keep this in mind for everything I'm saying. The physical law of American politics at the moment is Trump is creating bigger backlashes than the support that he's generating, and that's why I think he is a dead end as far as the future goes, because in 2 years' time, when undoubtedly a lot of what Biden has tried to do will end in disappointment. That's just the way it goes. There will be major disputes within the Democratic Party between progressives and liberals. If they've still got Trump, the specter of Trump, and a Trumpified Republican Party to unify them, doesn't matter. Trump's potentially the greatest unifying force that that Democrats have. But what matters more immediately to Republican legislators is the Republican base, because that's who they've got to face in 2 years' time before they face Democratic opponents. And, so many of them are in safe seats anyway. Democratic opponents aren't that much of a concern. As we said, there were only 5 Republican senators who were actually in states that had been won by Joe Biden, and 3 of them voted for impeachment and are on the way out. Anyway, so it's very hard to tell, but certainly at the moment we can see Trump's hold on the party at the grassroots is pretty strong.
That is fair.
Yes.
I don't have anything to add about Republicans. All I'd say is just that I hope, just on the impeachment thing, just once again thinking about history, I hope they hold a commission. Nancy Pelosi said that she wanted a 9/11 style commission a few weeks back.
Yep.
Hope she sticks to it, because I think the commission can do all the subpoenaing that the impeachment trial didn't do.
Yep.
It's also the perfect opportunity for Republicans to stab Trump in the back anonymously without any consequences.
Okay,
and they'll take advantage of that.
Yep.
So we might actually get some answers. And I mean, in the end, the fix was obviously in with the vote. So who cares?
Yep.
The important thing is that you get the story out.
Yep.
And so that's the way to get it. So I hope they hold that commission.
Absolutely. All right, Peppers, that's it. That's impeachment. We're never going to talk about this again.
Nope.
It's over. Like, we've got the same attitude as the Democrats in Congress. It's over. We're moving on.
Next time we're talking about COVID bills.
Done.
Right.
How about the Super Bowl? Didn't that suck? One of the worst ones I've ever seen.
Are we talking about that anymore, or is that as well?
No. I want to talk about the Super Bowl even less than I want to talk about impeachment. Sorry for anyone who was expecting detailed analysis, but the Super Bowl sucked.
Yeah, I believe you.
Yes.
See you guys.
See ya.
Bye-bye.